All right, welcome to the Jim Acosta Show, and it's another day that ends in Y and Donald Trump's assault on American democracy. He now has the Pentagon waging a war against dissent as the self-described Department of War is warning Arizona Senator Mark Kelly that he may be court-martialed simply for producing a video encouraging members of the military to remember they don't have to carry out unlawful orders. Let's discuss with Steve Schmidt, who hosts The Warning with Steve Schmidt on Substack and YouTube and everywhere else. Steve, great to see you.
Good to see you, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think about this? I mean, we should put the tweet up from, I mean, it all seems half-baked and cockamamie, but here's Pete Hegseth. The video made by the seditious six was despicable, reckless, and false. He goes on to say that Mark Kelly could be court-martialed and that sort of thing. And then you have the Department of War, which is not really called the Department of War. They've made this up, and Pete Hegseth, put up a sign outside the building that says that. It's not called the Department of War, but basically saying the same thing, threatening Mark Kelly with court-martial. What do you make of all? I mean, this is right out of Joe McCarthy, Red Scare. Your thoughts?
Well, the stupidity of it all shouldn't confuse us at all from the danger of it all.
Yeah, yeah.
And Pete Hegseth is an immoral leader of America's military, which predates the independence of the country. And it's commander-in-chief, first commander-in-chief, who sits first on the retired list, remains George Washington. And so this is an affront to every American value that you can think of, and then some, but most importantly, to the concept of the separation of powers. So I want to talk about this in two distinct categories. The first is the lawful, and then the second is the political. On the first side of it, we don't talk too much about this, but it's important. The Department of Defense is the lawful name of the organization.
Right.
And so I'm old enough to remember when all these red hats used to believe in the broken windows theory of policing, that small violations lead to deep transgressions. So in the year 1947, after the Second World War, when we went from the 38th largest army in the world in 1938 to a force of 16 million men under arms, it required a different generation of statesmen, serious leaders, to think about the changes to the society and how to organize the constant need for a vigilant defense against threats in a nuclear age. And the reforms of 1947 established the Department of Defense as the national military establishment.
Right.
The leader of the department is the Secretary of Defense. There is no Secretary of War.
Right.
And there is no Department of War. Now, there is a constitution with three co-equal branches of government. The Article 1 branch is the Congress. The Article 2 branch is the executive. And here we have an Article 2 branch officer, a cabinet official confirmed by the Article 1 branch, threatening the protected speech of a United States senator in a co-equal branch of government that he doesn't like, seeking to punish dissent with kangaroo court justice, which in this case is unconstitutional.
Right.
But two, the threat is important.
Yeah.
The threat is why General Milley and others are silent, that hangs in the air unreported on, which is the notion is if you speak out of turn, you'll be called back to active duty,
Right.
and you'll stand court-martial and maybe go to prison. And here's the deal with that. The military has a long tradition of kangaroo court justice. Dick Winters, the protagonist and hero of Band of Brothers, faced a Mickey Mouse court-martial. Jackie Robinson faced an unjust court-martial. General Benjamin O. Davis, famously, along with many black officers, faced an unjust court-martial. So in the case, because of the constitutional separation of powers, Mark Kelly is not able to do the right and the noble and the easy thing here, which is to say, hey, Secretary Hegseth, I'm delighted to return to active duty and to stand court-martial. Though Mark Kelly wouldn't say it, I'm sure he could figure out a polite way to say F you.
Yeah.
And
Well,
he would
Ruben
be
Gallego said that
acquitted.
apparently, but go ahead.
He'd
Yeah,
be
we'll get there.
acquitted in that
Yeah.
court-martial and then perfectly positioned to run for president. But understand the undue influence of the command on an unjust prosecution breaks the military justice system, just like Trump is breaking the Department of Justice. And in the end, it's going to take a very careful review of every text, of every email that was sent over these years to root out the politicization of the officer corps. Every instance of politicized corruption will be known. The inspector generals will be back and will know. But the attack on Senator Kelly is outlandish.
It is. And it violates the spirit of what we're supposed to have in this country, which is civilian control of the military. I mean, this idea that you can just go after people for what they say via the military is just not, it's just counter to the American experience. And you mentioned Mark Kelly. We have his statement. We put his statement up. Senator Mark Kelly put up a very dignified response. There's his uniform. He says, when I was 22 years old, I commissioned as an ensign in the United States Navy and sworn oath to the Constitution. I upheld that oath through flight school, multiple deployments on the USS Midway, 39 combat missions in Operation Desert Storm, test pilot school, 4 space shuttle flights at NASA, and every day since I retired, which I did after my wife, Gabby, was shot in the head while serving her constituents. Talking about his wife, Gabby Giffords. He goes on to say, if this is meant to intimidate me and other members of Congress from doing our jobs and holding this administration accountable, it won't work. His colleague in the Senate from Arizona, Ruben Gallego, and I'm just telling you, this is what he said. He told Pete Hegseth that he can go fuck himself. He used that kind of language. And that's the kind of pushback that we need right now. I mean, quite honestly, I mean, they are making a mockery of this, and you've got to stand chest to chest with these dudes. They're totally out of control.
Well, there's the difference between a U.S. Navy captain, Mark Kelly, and a United States Marine Corps Lance Corporal. Between Ruben Gallego, the junior senator from Arizona, and Mark Kelly, the senior senator. I knew a former senior senator from Arizona pretty well. He'd be proud of both of those guys.
That's right.
And he would be indignant about this, to say the least. Look,
if only we had him right now, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
Pete Hegseth is a deeply paranoid Captain Queeg type figure, deeply disrespected.
Yeah.
He is referred to behind his back by the brass in Washington at the Pentagon as the Major. And it's done dismissively and derisively, just like the German general staff used to dismiss Hitler as the corporal. And so same dynamic.
That's exactly right. And, your thoughts, though, Steve, on this notion that, members of Congress ought to be able to tell members of the military, especially if they've served in uniform, that you have a duty to not obey, to not follow unlawful orders. And the Hegseth and, and so on, they've said, oh, no, you have to follow the president's commands no matter what they are. That's bullshit. That's not how it works.
Well, no, that's absolutely not true. And it's contrary to the training. And I think it's important to understand You don't need a permission slip by virtue of being a veteran to deliver that admonition in a country that maintains civilian control over its military. Douglas MacArthur, in his very famous 1962 speech at West Point, says to the assembled cadets, right, the military does not belong to the army, to the soldier. It belongs to the nation. Its legacy is to the citizen, not to the soldier. The group that I started with some other folks, the Save America movement,
Yep.
the very first communications we did, the first advertisements were on this subject 5 months ago to the 2-7 Marines deployed in Los Angeles, where we reminded them that in America they swear an oath to the Constitution, that they swear an oath to the republic, not to a man, not to a leader, not to a party, not to a faction, and that saying, I followed orders, is not a defense
Right.
for committing crimes. And so, whether it has been the time that I have spent in My Lai, or in Auschwitz, or in Treblinka, or in Theresienstadt, or Dachau, or Bergen-Belsen, or any of the other camps, or any of the places, where there were race riots and murder, whether that's in Tulsa, whether that's in Wilmington, North Carolina, Charleston, North Carolina. How do these evil acts transpire and happen? There's a book about this subject called Ordinary Men that tells the story of Special Police Reserve Battalion 60 of ordinary Germans that become some of World War II's most notorious killers. If you read the opening statement of the Nuremberg trials delivered by an American Associate Justice of the Supreme Court named Robert Jackson, who's the chief prosecutor, if you read the words of Francis Biddle, who was the Attorney General of the United States under FDR, becomes one of the Nuremberg judges.
Mm.
This issue is of the most profound importance. And we have in this country right now, as we speak, this instant, 66,000 people, all of whom have committed no crime whatsoever in conditions that we do not know about, other than that they are abusive, that they cannot see communion, that there is no transparency around. And so in that moment, when we see this cruelty everywhere, when we see a priest being shot in the head by a pepper ball from on top of an ICE facility by a masked agent, what is paramount is to remind every single person. The Save America movement has ads around these prison facilities directed at the guards saying, there is no hidden corner, secret space where you can do this evil at. There will be accountability. What you have done will become known. It will be seen. It will be recorded, and there will be justice. And so the best way to avoid catastrophe at an individual level, at an institutional level, is to understand from the outset that illegal orders are illegal in the United States. And so when we're blowing boats out of the water on the word of Donald Trump and a pack of liars, everybody involved should be given long thought to the legality of what it is they're being asked to do. And every American has a right to communicate to every soldier, every sailor, every airman, every Marine about the expectations we, the citizens of this nation, have of them, who are the shields of a republic, not the militia of a thug autocratic leader.
That's it. That's it in a nutshell, Steve. I mean, you're absolutely right, and really love the history lesson as well. People forget, and it also kind of flies in the face of what we think of our military. We want our military to uh, not just be a force for good, but that you have some sense that it is part of us. And if there's any kind of a sense that the military is the tool of the whoever happens to be president of the United States, then we're living in a very different place. We're not living in that country anymore. And my concern is when you see, you know, Trump sending in troops to places like Los Angeles, when you have real concerns, I think, going into next year's midterm elections, that Trump may want to use the military to intimidate voters going to the polls in the upcoming midterm. I mean, for Christ's sake, he's talked about wanting to shoot protesters in the legs and having the military do that. There's a whole host of issues where it's perfectly legitimate for these members of Congress to say, not only are we're not imagining things here, there are cases in point where obviously we need to communicate to members of the military. And I thought it was an ingenious way of doing it, to string together those videos. Very well respected members of Congress, Alyssa Slotkin, who's served in the CIA. I mean, these are all very important, well established people. The other thing that we got to get to, Steve, is what has taken place over the weekend. And you and I have talked about Marco Rubio before. You and I have had this discussion before. What the hell has happened to Marco Rubio? Well, over the weekend, there were members of the Senate from both Democrat and Republican side of the aisle who were saying that this peace these peace proposals that were being bandied about in Geneva
One
were
second, Jim.
basically
I'm still
Russian
with you.
talking points. Yeah. Oh, hang on. I got you.
Okay.
That these peace proposals that they were talking about out in Geneva were essentially Russian talking points, Kremlin talking points. And I was just wondering what you thought of that. God knows where this is all going to end up. But you saw Michael McFaul put out a tweet saying drafting a peace plan with Putin and then telling the Ukrainians to accept it is not mediation. It's acting as an agent for the Kremlin. There's Senator Mike Rounds, Republican, was saying that they were basically being told that, that the U.S. proposal, that the Trump proposal was basically from the Russian point of view. And Marco Rubio tried to go out there and clean it up, but he had to know that he was being roped into this. What the hell's going on?
Marco Rubio is a fascist. Marco Rubio is an immoral man. Marco Rubio, I said this 4 years ago, and when I did, he went nuts on Twitter, and so did Ted Cruz. But besides the time when I said the most delicate flower in the world is the male ego, besides that time, this may be the truest thing I've ever said, which was that if Marco Rubio was in Havana, Cuba in 1959, he would be dressed in olive drab and he'd be carrying Castro's coat or raincoat and locking up as many prisoners as he could, executing as many people against the wall to get to the highest position that he could get. And anybody who didn't understand that about this guy wasn't paying attention and was exercising bad judgment in their analysis as who we kept trying to tell you who he was, right? And this is a guy who's quoting Bible verses, quoting scripture, tweet after tweet after tweet. He, at age 52, is personally, directly, singularly responsible, his signature, for the deaths of scores of tens, which will climb to hundreds of thousands of children made in the image of God, according to what he says it is that he believes in, the teachings and gospels of Jesus Christ, the least amongst us, and by his hand, he signed the order that consigned them to painful and cruel deaths of starvation and dehydration and painful diseases that had been cured by the beneficence of the most generous people in the world, the American people. It wasn't Marco Rubio's money. It was our money, and it was our honor, and it was our charity, and it was our goodness. And he took it, and he desecrated it. And that man, who was an advocate for the very programs he killed, now is a great appeaser of America's most mortal enemy, a Russian dictator
Yeah.
who seeks war with the countries in the world that most share our values. And so we see this playing out in plain sight with great acts of corruption everywhere between the Trump officials, the Saudi government, the Russians. And the one thing we know is that there are two great warnings in American history. One is about avoiding foreign entanglements, and it was from George Washington, and the other was about a new danger that national military establishment had brought to life, the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned about.
Yeah.
And so what you see here is these dangers coming together in a way that's a real threat to every single American. It's disgusting. And Marco Rubio is a faithless man. He is un-American. He is oppositional to everything that he said he once believed in, but he now supports so he can have power with Trump. He's just hideous. He's disgusting.
And he's
pathetic.
and he thinks that this is his ticket to the 2028 campaign. And
he'll never be president.
And I'm sorry, again, you and I've talked about this before. This is the guy who tries to take shortcuts at every turn, and he thinks that he can sort of leapfrog the rest of the field by doing Trump's bidding. But when you surrender yourself to somebody like Vladimir Putin, I mean, some of the stuff that the Americans were talking about in these so-called peace talks that were basically cutting out the Ukrainians, limiting the size of this 28-point plan. This is from Nick Schifrin over at PBS. And this was Senator Angus King, the leaked 28-point plan, which, according to Senator Rubio or Secretary Rubio, is not of the administration's position. It is essentially the wish list of the Russians. I mean, that is some wild stuff to be acknowledged by United States Senator Angus King, who is not like some wide-eyed progressive. He's an independent from Maine. But I mean, some of the things that they were talking about was limiting the size of the Ukrainian military, handing over territory.
Like the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
It's just
right. It's a treacherous document. It's an embarrassment.
It's an embarrassment.
Here's the deal. Either MAGA survives or the American Republic does. Either or. One or the other. And there's no way back across the bridge for someone like Marco Rubio. The die is cast. And I don't think Marco Rubio will ever be president. I think he's going to live his life with a lot of ignominy and a lot of shame. I think a lot of these people, I think the person that they should look to as the model for what life is going to be most like for them is Prince Andrew Mountbatten, excuse me. Right? It's going to be a lot like that. You know, a guy like Rubio, he looks like he's in good shape. The Cubans have a lot of longevity as a people. I think Marco Rubio's got 40, 50 years at least, right, of living in total ignominy and shame and villainy in this country. All these people do. And by the time we get to the end of this disaster, right, remember something. Franklin Roosevelt was elected in 1932. The next Republican was Dwight Eisenhower.
Yes, that's right.
Who won the Second World War, that both parties tried to recruit to be their nominee. You did not have a Republican elected to the office of president who was not the hero of a world war from 1932 until 1968.
Right, Richard Nixon.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
This year of Trump is not a year old yet.
No.
We have a while to go to get to an election with a cratering economy where the gaslighting, the lies, we got the agriculture secretary telling the farmers it's never been better when the metrics tell us that the farmers are now the leading suicide demographic in the country. We got Howard
Yeah.
Lutnick telling the American family the tariffs are great for them. The billionaires are feasting. The billionaires are dining out. We got J.D. Vance in that 1970s Eddie Munster sweat stain, pit stain shirt with the Saudi prince doing Bitcoin deals. It
Yeah.
is it is all going
The fool's
down.
paradise.
It's
Yeah.
all going down, and the American people are going to repudiate it. Trump does not have the power to cancel elections. Trump does not have the power to kill people who dissent with him, right? All of the horror show, all of the lies, all of the vapid questions asked of all the
Yeah.
liars
And
cannot save them.
no, that's right. And add to that, I mean, he just got his ass handed to him in federal court. In the Comey case, the Comey and Letitia James cases. I mean, these cases were dismissed without prejudice. I suppose they could come back from the dead. But you have a federal judge saying that Lindsey Halligan, the supremely unqualified interim U.S. attorney who was implanted in there because they couldn't find somebody in the U.S. attorney's office who would take on these kangaroo court, Mickey Mouse court cases. And they were just, it's just what an embarrassment. This is an embarrassment for Donald Trump and his administration and the Justice Department. Just unreal to have a former FBI director have his case dismissed. Like, I mean, it's just the whole saga is a goddamn national embarrassment.
The Democratic majority to come has to make commitments to the American people after the Merrick Garland era
Yes.
of the oversight to come and the review of all that has happened, all that has been done, and the reforms that lead to a type of reconstruction of the country, of the democracy, of our liberties under threat. Every instance of somebody saying that people who have been warning about the danger of this were exaggerating,
Right.
were hyperbolic, were too much, has been proven wrong.
Correct.
All of it. And
Some of us were
so
run out of town on a rail for warning about it too, by the way. Anyway.
the fundamental truth of the moment is the reality of it can no longer be hidden and it can no longer be denied. Everybody has become who they have chosen to become in a moment that gave everybody an opportunity to reveal what they were all about completely, fully, and absolutely. No question about who has integrity and who doesn't, who has conviction and who doesn't, who's an actor and who's not, who's a patriot and who's not, what matters and what doesn't. And so, we live in an era where richest man in the world and the Kardashians jamming out at a birthday party in a house worth $258 million. 47% of the country doesn't have $400 cash. The Ellisons are about to control overwhelming percentages of America's communications companies.
Right.
The consolidation of power into realms of new kingdoms. We don't have to tolerate it. And so politics evolves, it changes. There are moments in our history where events slow like a lazy river to a trickle in the summer, and other times they rage like rapids. And that's the type of season we're in on that river, and we're in it, and we have to get through it, and we have to defeat it by appreciating that on the question at hand, there are two distinct sides. One is imperfect and one is fascist. One seeks to take your liberty and freedom. The other one does not. One is a patriotic side. The other is a cult of personality built around the whim of a man. His delusions are a gospel delivered by his apostles who are supposed to work for us, but instead have traded in a constitutional oath for a seat on Predator Patio at Mar-a-Lago. And the great underbelly of American society has always been greed. You had Hollywood studios, American companies doing business with the Nazi Germans well into early 1942. Couldn't quite believe we were at war with them yet.
That's right.
And in this moment has laid out a record that he's etched into granite and carved in the rock about who did what and when they did it. And in the end, the one thing I don't know the answer to is how much damage will be done by this gang.
That's right.
But I do know they will not succeed, and they will be buried and hauled up high by the high court of history.
That's right.
They are villains, and our side wins, and the country will be stronger, ever stronger, through the test of faith that has come, that will drive a renewal, that our children will be the beneficiaries of. I deeply believe that.
Amen. I hope you're right. I hope you're right. No, in other words, too many turkeys around these days, not enough mashed potatoes. But Steve Schmidt, always a pleasure, man. Always enjoy the passion.
See you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. And we'll do it again soon.